The Tendys on Pattison. Yeah, finally. We got there. 5:30 came 45 minutes later today. 5:30 at 6:15. We are the Tendys on Pattison. We are here to talk Flyers hockey. If you're not familiar with who we are here Thursdays at 5:30 on flyerz. I am I left John Griffin up. I am Jack Griffin, joined by Chris, who's on our Twitter handle, and Paul Baccio on the bottom there. We're here to talk about being miserable for how long has the season been? I know it's shorter, but being miserable for the last 4 months.
Feels like I've been miserable since they beat the Canadiens.
Ever since that COVID break, when they all the COVID outbreak, I feel like that's when shit went downhill.
The Ides of March.
yeah, the Ides of March. Ever since Tahoe, right? Like we didn't go into. I think that us three. I don't know about people watching at home, but we didn't go into that game very excited because we were missing so many players, and that was it. Like that was the season. Once that game happened, nothing ever really got on track. Not regularly enough.
No, the only thing that got on track was our goals against. It kept going up.
Well, and you kept having these games where they were like quote unquote character games. Oh, they came back from being down a couple goals and winning overtime or winning the last couple seconds. Is this one that gets the train back on the tracks? And it just never seemed to be consistent. It would be that happened, and then they would come out and drop 8 to the Rangers.
It's clear they're just toast. They're just
done. Well, at this point, like there just came a point where even though they like mathematically could have been fighting, you felt like that maybe they accepted that they just don't have it this year.
Yeah, and obviously Chuck accepted that by his deadline moves.
Yeah, and I wonder though. I don't want to play psychology, but I wonder if he felt that way. Like he was just going to roll for the most part with what he had, unless something spectacular happened. Like I feel like the very quiet off season kind of set a little bit of that tone too.
I mean, he was stuck. I mean, we've talked about it before, but he was sort of stuck. He found out late about Niskanen, and there were no easy replacements, and with the Kraken. Getting their crack house ready. He wasn't going to risk losing even more next year or this off season. So at least Ghost gets to sit out the next 2 games and just watch in the press box like us.
I mean, he wasn't happy at practice today about his suspension. I mean, at the end of the day, as crazy as it was boarding. But we talked about this right before we got on how much of a joke the player safety is. It's just the suspensions don't make sense. The whole Tom Wilson thing and the Rangers getting fined $250,000. It's a joke. It's as a fan, you just get angry. You're just like you don't care about these player safety. Like how does Tom Wilson should legitimately been suspended, probably for the rest of the season and the next series. I know it's hard to do it, but that probably should have happened.
I would have. He doesn't deserve any. I mean, he can't suspend him for the playoffs. They would have had 4 games left after that game.
Suspend him for half of it, right?
So 2 games. He should have got a 2-game suspension because of his history, because of just everything that happened with that situation. Like I had said in the text, it's not like he killed somebody, which that's what the Rangers were talking about. It's basically like he sawed Panarin's leg off on the ice. So their release, the press release, calling for Paros's job and everything. It's just so ridiculous. And it's obvious it came from Dolan, the owner, because both Jeff Gordon and John Davidson didn't publicly support it, so they got the can. Which I'm Davidson doesn't give a shit. He doesn't
seems like
care.
a passionate guy, right?
He was he was going to stand his ground, but it was good to see a guy like Gordon who is not a long-term GM. Like, it's not like he's been around the game like Fletcher has for like 20 years. So it was good to see that he just didn't take the company line. But then, Drury gets handed here. You get both jobs.
I mean, what a job to luck into a little bit, though, right? Like, anybody, like, the heavy lifting for the Rangers. Now, obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but man,
yeah, it's you can look at it two different.
A lot of pressure, right? A lot of pressure.
You can look at it from your perspective, how you just like they have all these young guys, and they have guys with a lot of ceiling, very high ceiling on their careers, but there's a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of salary cap juggling coming up. You have to decide, you obviously have to go all in on Shesterkin, but he has not had a good year either. So, is he sold on Quinn? Was Quinn his guy? Do you risk bringing in another coach? You're gonna have to sign Adam Fox, Lafreniere. In 2 years you have to sign him. Kapu Kaku, you're gonna have to sign him in a year. Like, he has a lot of heavy lifting still to do. So to get them to the next level, and being in New York, like taking that next step, and he makes the playoffs next year, but then they get bounced in year one, and now you're 3 years into the Panarin deal. So, New York's not going to be happy with that, much like we wouldn't be happy. So they have to make the playoffs, and they have to in reality make the second round next year to make people happy.
And I guess that is a little bit of a segue, make us look like professionals, into like one of the other things that I wanted to talk about a little bit was you're like in the NHL, and the playoffs aren't like they used to be, where it felt like, like the rumor, I don't want to say the rumor, but the statement always was like, half the league makes the playoffs. So making the playoffs doesn't really mean much in the NHL. But the reality is just like in the NBA, you're not really a contender in those leagues unless you either win your division or you win a round. The teams that win around regularly, or are in that conversation, or win their division on a regular enough basis, they're the there's teams that are on the fringe, and the Flyers, I know that we like to think that they stink. And this year that would be true. But the reality is they're in that middle ground. They're not, last year it was an exception, but they haven't been, if we take last year out, they haven't been a true contender. And the Rangers are kind of in a similar boat, other than when AV took them to the finals, right? They've kind of been middling around.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm sorry, a friend of mine who happens to be a Caps fan, Scott, I'll call him out, Scott Martinez. He says, so to recap, Wilson gets a little testy with some Rangers, forfeits 5,000. The team comes back and wins. Rangers lose their ever living minds. Yeah, I'll accentuate that. Fire 2 executives, whine in a stupid statement, lose 5 out of 6 fights, get fined $250,000, lose the game. Buznevich gets suspended, and the Caps win. That's a pretty
good deal for Washington. Yeah, right. Like, pretty good deal for Washington.
But yeah, so the Flyers have been stuck in neutral, and it just sucks that you have this year. COVID just sort of screwed everything up, their momentum up, and obviously, like, it's done much worse to many other people, so they can't whine about it. But it really has, because if it wasn't for COVID, they would have went into the playoffs last year scorching hot. Now, they could have got swept in the first round and wouldn't have mattered, but it still would have been the next step. And then you would have been coming this year. Niskanen would not have retired. The only reason he retired was because of COVID, because of all the rules and restrictions this year. So then then they had to fill that hole, and then you take in consideration the lack of practices and the constant COVID issues, and it just screwed everything up. So, but yes, they're the first professional sports team in the 4 major sports ever to go 11 straight years of make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, straight through. So they've been stuck in that middle ground. We've all been in purgatory for 11 years. And this offseason is a huge, gigantic offseason for both Fletcher and the Flyers, because he has to make some big deals to really get the ship going in the right direction, and get some big name players, and just take a swing for the fences, because these little moves, it's time to go big or go home.
So on that, I guess my question for you then is like, I'm not going to sit here and pick Chuck apart. But a lot of people, if you pay attention to Flyers Twitter, which I don't really suggest a lot of people do, the knock on Fletcher was that he's very good at kind of being in mediocrity. He builds kind of average rosters. What's up, Bald Eagle? But I think that I would say he's learned his lesson a little bit from that. I think that Chuck has been around the game a long time. His father was a GM as well. But I want to sit here and say, like, we worship in some ways. I think that like the people sitting at this in front of these cameras would say, like, Ron Hextall is a mixed bag. But I guess my feeling is like, we're sitting here and I feel like Hextall was left at a crossroad, and you tell me if I'm wrong. And that was, I can try and, just kind of use the picks where I'm at and build and kind of rebuild the farm, which he did. But we didn't really, we'll see what ends up happening other than Provorov, and we'll see what Frost ends up being. There's not really, and we'll see what Sanheim ends up being, I guess. But I mean, you're talking about, Sanheim was drafted in 2013, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's not yesteryear, like that's not last year. That's quite a bit away. At this point, development should happen.
Yep.
So we're left a little bit with, through the draft, of like high end talent, just kind of sticking where you're at or trading for back end first round picks. There's not, like, I don't want to say a savior, but there's not a first line center, or there wasn't, we'll see, or we'll see what York ends up being, but that York's a Chuck pick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's not really like a top 2 defenseman or like a first line center in your farm. And so he was left with, do we keep trying to compete with the roster we have? And I don't necessarily know how movable the other pieces were. Go ahead.
Well, part of the problem is, this isn't the NFL. You're not trading up into the top 5 to get a guaranteed stud that's going to change your franchise in the next 2 years. The NHL doesn't work that way, outside of Crosby, McDavid. But you're not.
I'm not talking about trading up, though. What I'm saying is that
no, I'm talking.
There was a choice to be competitive, quote unquote. And middle of the road, or I'm not going to say they should have been like the Sixers, but they could have accepted a rebuild, I guess is what a rebuild versus a retool. Those are his words.
Well, it was clear that he didn't completely ignore, but he pretty much ignored the NHL roster. He let the guys that were there be there, and he made little minor pickups, vets, like our Dale Weises and that kind of BS, and he tried to get as many picks as possible, because if you're looking to get as many good players as possible, you need as many darts as possible to hit a bullseye. And it's proven in the NHL draft, you can hit a home run later in the draft. Giroux was a 20th overall pick, so like. he wanted as many shots at getting good players as possible, and that's what he did. I mean, and he wasn't going to trade up. He traded up when he felt as though he needed to trade up. Heck, he built to the draft. Now, when Chuck takes over, he's in a different scenario. He's in a spot where he has to take the club from a young, prospect-laden team to the next step, to being a competitive team. And he did that. He filled holes quickly, and he tried to complement the young players with some other veterans in some of their holes, like Niskanen, like Braun. And now he's left to, all right, so do we stick with those good young players like Konechny and Myers? Who do we stick with for them to build and develop? Who do we use to trade to get more established players? Like I said via text, I would trade Konechny and picks for Patrick Laine. And even though Laine is – TK is not an awesome two-way hockey player, but Laine is even less. But Laine's offensive ability is far superior than what Konechny offers. So
will ever offer.
Yeah. So I think they need that. And I also said that they should probably trade Myers and whatever combination of prospects for like Matt Dumba, who is a Chuck guy. Chuck drafted him. He's a very, very good defenseman for the Wild, and he would be a perfect complement to Provorov on the top pairing. Not to mention righty lefty, but he's already a top pairing defenseman. So he's not a dominant number 1D. He's not Victor Hedman, but you're taking two 1As in Provorov and Dumba, pairing them together. That's an awesome top pairing. So, yes, does that then leave you a hole on your second pair? Yes, but it's a lot easier to fill your fourth spot than it is your top pairing spot.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong then. Like, you feel a lot more comfortable if it came down, if push came to shove, you feel a lot more comfortable with Braun playing second line minutes or second pairing minutes than first pairing minutes. Like you'd feel, if that were the best bad decision you could make, you'd feel a lot better than a worse decision, which would be Braun and Provorov, right? And I think that you mentioned Dumba and Minnesota and Laine and Columbus now, and those are good trading partners, right? Like, first off, Laine is an RFA next year. He's not under it's not under contract, but he's an RFA right now. He's playing fourth line minutes, I believe. I can't imagine, even if they fire Torts tomorrow, he's going to want to stick around there either. Well,
apparently the Jackets GM Jarmo Kekalainen, I got that right. He apparently is very hard on his restricted free agents. And if you noticed, a lot of their, superstars end up leaving. Now, it's not all on him, but Aaron Portzline, a reporter for the Jackets, posted an article saying as much. Now, this was from guys that were not mentioned. His sources were not mentioned, but they were players within the organization, either current, I assume current and past. So, and it's not all his, he wasn't just blaming him, but he's a very shrewd business person, which explains why he gets along so well with Torts. I see him making, moving him. There's no way Liney's not happy. He's obviously not happy. There's no way he's staying there. So to get an RFA where you can sort of still control that next contract, so it's not stupid big. If he can say, look, sign another 2-year bridge deal, come here, come to the Flyers, you dominate, and then you sign your mega deal. Because when he signs that mega deal, G's off the books. Hopefully Jake is gone, JVR is gone. You have a lot more cap room.
And I just think that Columbus is a great trading partner because they're going to be an organization in flux again. again. Right? They're not. They're. I guess they're. Even if they move Line, they're still. They weren't going to keep Dubois either. The player that rumored that they really wanted was Roslovic, right? Like that's who they.
They needed a center.
Yeah.
They had no centers, and it's even worse now. I mean, Roslovic is your second line center, and I think Max Domi is your first line center because they traded Foligno to Toronto, so they need center depth. So it wouldn't surprise me if you saw Patrick dumped in there too.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't care. Like they have not traded a first round pick in a long time, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some picks on the move as well. Who knows what that deal looks like, but if you're talking about getting high-end talent, sometimes it takes some players and some picks. That's just the reality. So, but I think that those are two real, like, you're not going to turn around and snipe a great player off a contender. It doesn't matter. It's just not going to happen. Nope. And in the NHL, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, you might know the history better. Your team really gets better through, other than when you have a player like Panarin, who was a cap casualty kind of in Chicago, and then just really wanted to be in New York after his short stint in Columbus, correct? He just, when he was a free agent, he said, I want to play in New York. For the most part, your team improves through the draft and through trades. It's not really through free agents. Free agents in hockey are very expensive.
Now, usually. And you also look at it, guys like that don't become available because you draft them, you develop them, you sign them, and you sign them to their deals so they don't go anywhere. That's the whole point. So that you're keeping your costs, you're controlling your own costs by signing them before they're done. I mean, the Phillies tried to do that with Scott Kingery. It blew up in their face. It looks terrible. But that was part of the reason. You sign him to a deal like that. I'm not overly familiar with his contract situation.
They do have bread too.
Yes.
He is the bread man.
Yes. Their bread bowls are awesome. I love the chicken wild rice. Now we got to get some ad money, right? Is that how it works?
Shout out Panera.
Yeah. So like you need cost certainty, and that's what the Flyers need.
So, but I guess the point too is like players for the most part stay, and it's so rare that a team would be so have drafted so well and so talent rich that really a player of Panarin's caliber ends up being a casualty, right? Like what a world to be in for Chicago. But the reality is they also weren't happy about being in the world that they were in because they felt as though they were being punished for putting together good drafts.
It's also poor roster management. I mean, you can't get to that point. You just can't. Basically, they have Nikita Zadorov right now for Panarin. That's basically what they have.
Sounds like the Hasek trade they made.
That's pathetic. Pathetic. Yeah. Well, yeah, but Hasek wasn't a Vezina winner when he traded.
Fair enough.
All right, so we're talking about the free agents, and you don't think the Flyers would make a run towards a defenseman, or you think they're going to stick with their guys?
What do?
Hamilton is the only one that looks like.
Yeah, Hamilton.
He's not. We'll see what happens. I don't think he's going to make the free agent market.
I will talk about a free agent you guys probably haven't thought of, and it's not out there a lot. Rod Brindamore. His contract is up at the end of the year.
To coach.
To coach, and apparently he's told Carolina ownership that if you're going to sign me, he's not going to want this huge deal, but sign his whole staff, trainers, everyone. I mean, that shows you what kind of guy he is, but he wants everyone anyone that does anything for them, the assistant equipment manager, the breakfast chef, like everyone, he wants them all resigned as well. So it's like a package deal. So here's a question that I will pose for the three people we have watching.
5 likes though.
If Brindamore becomes a free agent, do you fire AV to bring Brindamore in?
So I think that I'll let Chris go next, but I feel like the only way that I would fire Vino and not give him another year, because I don't think it's fair to judge this year that strongly, is if he's unwilling to move on from his special teams coaches. If they want to come back with the same special teams coaches and he's unwilling to do that, then he's got to go. It's the same as Hextall having to go for not moving Hextall. My opinion. I don't know how you feel, Chris.
No, you're absolutely right, because it's been atrocious. Like, you have to.
Somebody's got to be accountable, right?
Yeah, and you go back to the Andy Reid days of football when he would fire like the Juan Castillos and everything else. Someone has to be held accountable for this season. It's there in the writing on how bad the Flyers power play unit has been on both sides. So it's not like all right. So the penalty kill was so, but the power play wasn't any better, and the penalty kill is what 30th. Like that's a disgrace. Like it's like you sit there and you look at like how bad the Flyers actually were from that COVID break to where they are now, and the tremendous drop off that has been going on for them. It's insane how bad they've been. Like, it's literally.
Why does baseball keep getting dragged into this show?
We're talking hockey.
No, because he's cracking a joke. But
I know, I get it.
If you're going to keep AV,
and his two cats count.
Yes,
his two cats count. So then we have 5 viewers.
Right. If you're going to keep AV, you got to tell them. Well, more or less how it was with, Doug Peterson. Dude, your guys got to go. And if he's like, nah, well, then they're going to quote unquote fire AV, because I can't go through another season of watching a team, the Flyers score, and then 30 seconds later, you don't even get to see the highlight reel of the goal, and the other lamp's getting lit. So it's ridiculous. So if you don't get rid of the special teams, you unfortunately you got to get rid of AV. You got to get rid of AV. And we all said, give them a chance, but. Listen, keep them, but you got to make changes. Like, I thought this team was going to be good with the coaches they had on it, the Ian Lapierre, however you say his name.
Lapierre.
Lappy.
And the Tarians that you had them from Pittsburgh. You had the coaching there. It just didn't translate to wins on the ice. And that's what sports is all about. It's wins. So,
it's also about scapegoats. And who is a scapegoat? I think someone has to get fired. That being said, to answer my own question, would I fire AV and that staff and bring in Rods? Every single day, any day that ends in Y, I would 100% do it, because they don't owe AV anything at all.
No, you're right. They don't. But I don't know. I guess people are still hung up on last season and how good they were last season from where they were.
Well,
like the previous. Season.
For good reason, but. Look what Rod's built down there, and obviously it's not just him, but that's it's the whole reason he wants his whole staff. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be hiring the whole staff, but I'm outside of his assistant coaches. You're not just going to start firing equipment managers to bring in Carolina.
Right.
But that's the first hire.
Listen, you're only as good as your assistant coaches, and that's why Bill Belichick of the Patriots is a great coach. He always had great assistants. They never translated to being good coaches in the NFL, and that's fine. There could be some coaches on this team, that are good assistants. We don't have any, and right now we don't have. There isn't one assistant coach on the Flyers who I think would be a good, maybe Tarian, but other than that, like, no, I just. Don't think
I wouldn't.
Head coach.
Again, we're talking about giving AV a pass. Not a pass, but just a longer rope, right?
If you're hired for 2 years and one season's good and one season's bad, it's up to you how much weight you want to give each one.
Year 3 makes the trend, whether it's you're reverting back. That being said, we've talked about, we've harped on the practice time. Well, one of the biggest things to work on in practice is your special teams. So when you're not, it's sitting in the locker room and going, all right, guys, this is going to be our 5-man unit for the power play, and this is what we're going to do. But, Coach, are we going to be able to do it on the ice? Nah, sorry, we can't do that because we have 8 games in this 5-week period or 5-day period. Yeah, we got 2 double headers. So, like, there's only so much the guys can do. That being said, I if it was me, it would be Terrian would be the man to go. Mike Yo, who doesn't get much talk, yes, he's in charge of the penalty kill. The penalty kill is more, to me, it's on all of it's on the players, but the PK especially, because you didn't have certain guys available. You guys the guys that are needed for the PK have had shitty years. So when you're left with slop A and slop B to work on the penalty kill, especially on the back end, because Niskanen was a huge part of the PK last year. So, and then you have the other part of the PK is Phil Myers, who in his first full pro NHL season had an awful year. So that means half of your killing defensemen, one wasn't there and the other one was barely there physically.
All right, so I get the whole Niskanen thing. Like we get it. Like we know he was huge upgrade, a huge loss, and Chuck Fletcher didn't have a backup plan because obviously it wasn't expected. But I feel like Chuck Fletcher's got to be on the hot seat too. The Flyers I think they have $26 million in salary cap space, and that's not including if for some reason they're able to trade Jake Voracek and anybody else. So like I feel like this is also, like we said earlier, you were talking earlier, it's a big year for him. He's got to make a splash, whether it be draft day, whether it be sign Doug Hamilton if he hits the market. Like he has to do something. Maybe sign an offense. If you're going to trade Konechny and you definitely get Lane, sign him to not a long-term deal, but like a Kevin Hayes-esque, like 4 to 5 years. He has to do something. I feel like the coaching staff and the GM are on the hot seat, and obviously we all know the players are. We know who's being kept majority, and we know who's not being kept.
So, Paul, real fast, because you're going to have a lot more feedback than I will, but Chuck absolutely needs to be. Like Chuck was brought in because another GM wouldn't be aggressive. Like that is literally why Ron Hextall is not here, is because he refused to be aggressive. The franchise said it's time to make moves, and he was, no, Hart's going to stay in Lehigh. No, this roster is going to stay as it is, and that's when he got his that's when they called his ride. They said your Uber's outside. So Chuck, absolutely, he can't just sit on his hands. And like, yes, Niskanen leaves and it leaves a hole and you're scrambling to figure it out and you bring in Eric Gustafson, but it's not like Chara was not out there when they knew. He just chose not to go in that direction, which is fine. I
mean, we also don't know if he chose not
to. Okay, fair. That's fair. You're right.
Even though I think the Flyers could have guaranteed him a spot in the top 4.
Yeah. And maybe he didn't want that. Maybe at this point in his career, he said Washington has a much better chance at winning, or he felt that way. And I don't want to log top 4 minutes. We don't, Chara's in his 40s now, right? Like he's not a young man. We don't know.
You're the shit out of any of us.
Well, this is also true. Treat like a child. But we don't know. We don't know all of the conversations that happened. We don't know if the Flyers actually did make a run at Chara. We don't know what Chara was looking for in terms of money and promises and all of that stuff. But nonetheless, it's a job of a GM to make it, I don't want to say known, but rumors get out there, and that rumor didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, Chara is also averaging 19 minutes a game for Washington, so
that's a lot for at his age.
He wanted a 4th spot.
Did he want a fourth spot? I didn't know
because the Bruins weren't willing to guarantee him, which blows my mind.
He would have gotten a 2. He would have gotten a 2 spot here.
What is up with Boston? Like, you don't guarantee him. The fans give Tuukka Rask, I don't understand. Like,
they also let Krug walk. They let Chara and Krug.
Well, the Krug thing, that was just money. They couldn't afford him.
Fair, but
I mean, you have your young D up there with the Bruins. I just don't understand why you let him go. Okay, well, so they have.
But they haven't let youth walk in a while.
Not late. No, he's right. You are incorrect about that. TK Rise. It's not lately. They haven't let youth walk. There hasn't.
And
I mean,
that's a '90s thing.
That's the thing that Hextall did. He was like, I'm not trading you my prospect. You're not getting my Dana Zubers, who's 19 years old. You're not getting Peter Forsberg.
Prospel.
Like, yeah, you're not getting these guys, and that's the what. I guess it's a good thing, and it's a knock on Hextall.
Well,
if you had to like pick or choose, like it's a good thing to have, but a bad thing to have. If with what you have isn't working, you have to do something to make it work. And in and out of the playoffs every other year for the last 10 years, it's as comical as it is. It's a disgrace. And I'll give Flyer fans, they keep coming back for it. And like,
I bet you that's changing though. They're not selling their half capacity right now.
You don't think so?
No. I mean, even if there's 5,000 tickets, they're not selling 5,000 tickets.
That's the Flyers' fault.
It's no one's fault but their own.
I'm talking. I guess I have to tippy toe here, but when you're charging more money than what you normally do because you think you have to make money back up, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Well, you got to figure about it. Like, if you go to buy a beer, you have to buy a pretzel or something to eat.
Yeah, that's an Aramark thing, but
that's ridiculous. Like I don't want to pay a $10 beer and have a $6 pretzel. Like that's
wait, $10. Where'd you find $10 beer at?
Oh, I haven't been to a Flyers game since like 2010.
So
if you've been to a Phillies game, I don't know where the hell you're finding a $10 beer at. Let me know what section.
I don't drink. I tailgate.
In defense of Hextall a little bit, and in defense of maybe mediocrity for the last 10 years, which we're all angry about. But they're also like, if you're going to choose, like the Flyers did for a little while, to invest in your youth, development in hockey, other than the marginal stars, as much as he's been a quote unquote bust, Nolan Patrick made the NHL the year of his draft, even, he isn't where we want him to be now, but typically development of hockey players takes a while. So when you decide you're going to invest in your youth and not go after those aging veterans, sometimes that takes time too. It's just at some point the rubber has to meet the road. At some point you have to say these kids have to take a step. And I think that's where we are, us three are today. That's our concern, is that this year when you expected some of this youth to really take a step forward, you have some big questions.
That's what's disturbing about the year. Youth did take a step forward in certain parts. Farabee proved that he's exactly who they thought they were.
He's a very good player.
There's a reason he was a first-round pick. I mean, people, he's not that hot first-round pick name, but people forget he was a first-round pick.
But people also forget who he played on a line with when he was drafted. All the eyes were who he played with in World Juniors, and sometimes that line mate gets overlooked. And the reality is Joel Farabee was just as deserving as a much earlier pick as anybody. Sometimes that unsung guy is the guy that really helps that player make a name for himself. Like Michael Renberg was a very nice player in Philadelphia. He's not thought of the same way as Leclerc and Lindros, but he was a very nice player. And I'm just saying sometimes that Joel Farabee, he slips to where'd he go, 14?
Yeah, I think it was 14. It was either 14 or 15, but
he slips to 14, and he's on line mates. He was on a line with the guy that was number one pick.
So I know for me, like because I've been following the Phantoms on like Twitter. I try to watch their games whenever they're on, and I'm actually excited for Wade Allison. Like he looks like he's gonna be a good. He looks like he's.
Man.
I'm not getting into that. I think there's a lot of ups.
If I could reach to the screen, grab you by the throat, and snap your neck, I would.
So you're nuts. But I'm excited.
But is that such a bad thing to be? It's a bad thing because the Eagles messed that situation up, and then we'll let it go. Is Carson Wentz a bad player? We'll find out more. But yeah. I don't know that if you're telling me the trajectory is Carter Hart's going to have an MVP caliber season, I'll take it.
I mean, he he had to be injured this year or something, or he was just in his head. But anyway, no, like Wade Allison, like he's got a lot of upside. He's he's very gritty. Like I don't know what it is exactly, but I feel like he always has a chance to score. When he was on that, I think it was like in his second game or his first game, he was on the power play and it was right in front of the net and no one picked him up. And I'm like, that's big for a young kid. Like, and I can't wait. Like, I'm hoping next year he's on a line with either Giroux or Farabee. Like, he has to be on this team next year.
He will be.
Well, I mean, he will be. And then Tanner Lebizinski.
So, Paul,
there's no guarantee of anything. There's only so many spots.
Well, there's only so many spots, and we don't know what moves are going to be made. But he probably will be. So, Paul, because you're the coach out of us, right? When I see Allison, and Chris is talking, what I see is hockey IQ. He's got just enough grit to get to those places, but he knows, you need guys that are good off the puck, and that's what Allison looks like to me.
He's very tenacious. His back checking is excellent. Who he reminds me of?
Jake Voracek?
Pretty much anyone on the Islanders.
I'll take it.
That's a good comparison.
He reminds me. Trying to think. He reminds me of like a winger version of like JG Padjo, like someone like that, who's just a good overall hockey player. Although I think he's instead of a playmaker, he's a finisher. That being said, Padjo did have a four-goal playoff game at one point with an OT winner mixed in. But he's a good 200-foot player, and that's something they need. And especially
if you're going to make a move for a line A type player too, right? Like,
yes,
who's a 100-foot player.
Well, but again, like someone like him, you need guys like him,
yes, who are
cheap, who are on their entry level contracts. That's the whole point of drafting and developing. And I'm not like, we're not sitting here saying that Allison's going to be a superstar, but it's also a guy that everyone gave up on. That he was highly thought of, and he had a lot of injury issues in college, and he didn't find his way. He was a late bloomer because of those injuries, and now they might reap the rewards of it, which is really good. The fact that they stuck with him, they saw. Again, we're talking like he's already blossomed.
We think, right?
Yeah.
We
so
think.
it's good that they stuck with him.
Right. The potential is there for him to be a very good player for the Flyers.
Look, the way hockey is now, and as Paul was saying, as far as like you need cheap guys, the reality is that your third line is such a pivotal line. If you have a very good player on it, it makes a huge difference. Just look at last year for the Flyers, right? Like, they were at their best when their third and fourth lines really were the ones that were contributing. I mean, the reality is before the Patrick migraine stuff was they brought Hayes in to be able to move Patrick down to the third line because the third line is such a pivotal role. Obviously, your top six. You can't survive without a good top six. But if you've got a very good third line, it is such a difference maker. And it's not just a minute sucking line, like it's got talent on it. And Wade Allison to me strikes me as that's a perfect role for at least where we see his development going. He's probably not going to be a top 3 player. We'll see, like he could prove me wrong.
Think about this. Think about if you can have a third line of Morgan Frost, Scott Lawton, and Wade Allison, which is possible because
dripping with talent.
Next year, your third and fourth lines are going to be very young because
they don't have a choice, right? Like
Tanner Lachinsky, you're going to have him in the bottom 6. Obe Kubel is still young, so your bottom 6 forward are going to 4 or 5 of them are going to be very young, which is a good thing too.
I feel like that's kind of what you like. You either need them or like who we traded away, or a raffle, like who's like a guy who's probably better, right? That you're fortunate enough he's cheap enough to put down there. But you want your kids, and that's always the question, right? Is where's your franchise at? Would you rather have your kids getting big minutes in the minors or smaller minutes in the NHL. That's always that way. So these kids are eventually going to have to populate this roster in places, right? Like Morgan Frost, injury or not, I think that he's really, unless you trade him, and I know there's only so many slots, him not being on the big roster next year would really be a disappointment.
It's unacceptable. They have to. He has to be on this team somewhere. It's just a matter of where, and I think he will be. It really sucked that he got hurt. It really sucked because it totally robbed him of a year of development, an important year of development, especially dealing with everything with COVID. So, and I disagree with TCAN rises. We do not. You look at last year; they did not have an obvious weak of their 4 lines. They did not have a weak line. Now they didn't have a line like the perfection line or like McKinnon and Ranton and Landeskog, but they had a good first line, not a great first line, a solid first line. They had a good second line. They had a very, very good third line, and their fourth line was very, very good. So if you look at where was the weakness?
So, and when you were built that way, what you did was you made it that teams couldn't really match up the way you traditionally would, right? Like when the way that they were built last year, they could line their bottom pair with another team's top pair because they were all two-way players. So therefore you dictated mismatches when you're built that way. So yeah, you don't have that high end, like what we've been talking about, that high end, that Hart caliber player, or that no team really, other than maybe Colorado, has a perfection line comparable either. But Boston, that comes out of trade-off. They don't have, their bottom 6 isn't populated by, high talent players.
If the perfection line doesn't score,
they lose.
If McDavid and Draisaitl don't each get a point, they lose.
Yeah.
So you
either have one or the other. You don't usually have both. You don't have that level of talent and good talent at the bottom, or you don't have 4 good lines or 3 good lines and 1 great line. Like you either get one or the other.
That's how the Penguins won their 3 cups with Crosby. They got they especially the last 2 in 16 and 17. Their third line, which was Bonino, Kessel, and Hagelin, dominated. No one could match them because they were so overly concerned with shutting down Crosby's line and Malkin's line that that line was way better than any
lighting the lamp.
Yeah,
just lighting the lamp. TCAN Rise is on fire today. I don't know who their connection is. Obviously, turnovers are a big problem, but turnovers are like there are reasons for them. The turnover is just like an interception in football. Like it's not just a decision. A few things happen before that turnover that cause the turnover. Sometimes they're a misplayed puck. Sometimes they're kind of a marginally won battle. Sometimes it's just lazy. Sometimes you didn't look before you passed, and the Flyers have been really good at making maybe a little too fancy of a pass this season.
They were definitely lazy, I feel. But, real quick, if right now could you two name the 3 defensive pairings for next season? Obviously, we know that we're thinking there's going to be somebody who's not going to be back. If you had to guess who your defensive pairings would be for next season, who would it be? That's without signing Doug Hamilton.
Without signing a free agent, but they're going to have to make a trade. There's no way that they cannot bring somebody in.
If they don't, who do you think? If you had to guess off the top of your head, who would it be? I'm throwing you right on the spot because this is what we do.
Paul, do you want to take it first? Or do you want me to?
I can tell you who's going to be on each pair. It's going to be Provorov anchoring the first pair, Sanheim anchoring the second pair, and Braun anchoring the third pair.
And then it's what you do with Ghost,
Myers, and
then maybe what if you bring Big Sam back, Or
Sam's going to be in a third pair. Sam's going to be either 6 and 7.
And you still have Hag, right?
You still have Haig. So depending on what you do, you are going your 5, 6, and 7 are going to be Braun, Sam, Haig, Braun, Haig, someone. I'll just say I predict they'll trade for Dumba, and Myers will be part of that. So your first pairing is going to be friendly.
So while you're talking, T-Can rises. Yeah, we're saying it's a bad year. We're saying that this year is, like, part of my language is dog shit. And yes, turnovers are a problem. Goaltending has been a problem. Everything has been a problem.
Goaltending it reverts back to turnovers. A goalie can only bail you out so much. But then when you have goalies giving up bad goals, like all 3 goalies, I don't even know, has it been 3 or 4 goalies this year that have played for the Flyers? I know it's been Lyons, Carter, Hart, Elliott. I don't know if there's been another one thrown in the mix. If there was, I forget, to be honest with you, because I know
not that has started.
They didn't bring someone up for the beer league.
Yeah, right. We're going over to Grundy to scout. Everybody's been bad. Everybody. And what we have been saying is a little bit of, when we're talking about they being good, we're talking about last year, not even that much this past year, because everything has been a problem this year. But what we're saying is that, like, you're not going to be great everywhere, and what you can either be great in your top 3, or if you're lucky enough, top 3+1, and have a very good line, or you can be good 4 lines deep. This year, you've had flashes of players playing well, but you've had, it's been a mediocre season. That's what this season is the definition of mediocre. Win one, lose one. Win one, lose one.
All right. Do you want my official defensive prediction? Okay. Provorov, Dumba, Sanheim, Mike Riley, Braun, Sam Morin,
Hag or Ghost.
No, Ghost is gone. Ghost will have to be gone.
All right, so here's my next question. If they have a preseason and Cam York has a very good preseason, does he make the roster?
No.
What if he has a good 3 games now, and then he has a good 3 games or a good?
Chuck is going to make moves to ensure that there's no spot for him.
Or he really has to force their hand.
Yep.
He has to be so lights out good, he's going to force their hand. Josh, did you play with Josh at Ryan, Paul?
Yeah.
Josh, if we agree, but we can't let them off the hook completely either.
It all plays it's all.
You can't separate.
It all intertwines.
You can't, because it happens on both ends. The defense is bad. The goalie tries too hard to make up for it. The goalie tries to make up and fouls. Then the defense plays tight. Like, they are inseparable. No one's letting the defense off the hook. But the goaltending, when you're sub, 8,800, when you have a sub 88% save percentage, you can't blame it all on everybody else. There is an amount that you have to accept.
I'll tell you who gets left off the hook. That's the forwards. Forwards as part of a defensive unit, and that's been a giant issue with the core group for the most part over the last 10 years.
Yeah,
as much as we love Simmons, he was not good defensively. Jake has been,
but he punched people, Paul. But he punched people,
and he had a cool nickname.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. The Voracek. I mean, we in the text message we talk about it all the time on how bad Voracek's been on the back check and getting back and just being lazy out there. Like, it's not even that it's unacceptable. It just shouldn't happen on how lazy he's been. But because he called someone out in the beginning of the season, fans are gonna love him.
There's also
I don't know how many people love him.
Yeah, but there are things like Jake is his own worst enemy.
Yep.
on the ice. There's nobody that's a bigger enemy to Jake because he provides something that nobody else on the team and that Hayes thinks he's really good at is Jake is very good at just carrying the puck. And he's so hard to knock off of it, but he does it when he feels like it. Right. And then that makes him his own worst enemy. And he's horrible. He's just so inconsistent on back checking to where it's such a liability.
He was one of the main reasons why they were so good last year, because he bought in the AV system, and it was so obvious that he bought into the defensive back pressure and just the back checking and the just he bought into everything, and it's just he's become lazy now. Again, going back to the human aspect of it, and we talked about it last week. He has a kid over in Europe, and he can't see his wife or his baby. And, I'm sure that all plays into it. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. And they just I hope he's gone. And, nothing personal with Jake.
It's just time to move on.
Yeah.
It's just time to move on.
Yep.
So I guess to as we're getting close to the hour mark, we hit on it. We mentioned some names. So the reality is Chuck has a big offseason coming. We all think that that's the case. So the names that you threw out, Paul, were Dumba and Line, right? Like those are the I would say that there are two names that are probably more gettable in the trade market than some of the other ones, especially because of the team that they're on. So say they land both of those guys. Perfect world. There's still other problems to solve.
There is, like, backup goalie. That's one thing. And I've been on this since day one. Jonathan Bernier, I will sign him tomorrow. I appreciate everything Elliott has done. He can't be counted on to start any game. Like, he can't. At his age, he can't, and you see it. It's noticeable. If he has to start back-to-back games, he's not good in that second game. And you need a younger goalie that can take the reins if need be. And they don't have that. It's not in the system. I don't want to hear any of Alex Lyon or anyone like that. Give me Jonathan Bernier. He's been awesome for a terrible Detroit team. Look up his numbers. Watch their games. He's been awesome.
Yeah, we don't think of Detroit being a terrible franchise either, but they've been bad for a little while now.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Alex Lyons up here. He's Neil Little.
You can't have him up here with Hart alone.
Good comparison.
Yeah,
he's a good AHL goalie. That's it. He comes in. He's going to give up 3 goals. You can have the greatest defense in the world. There's a reason he's been in the AHL for so long, and that's not a knock on him. He's still playing professional hockey. He's just not an NHL goalie, and there's players like that in the NHL.
I'm not an NHL goalie
anymore.
There's the old who is it? The old Flyers coach, John Stevens. He was a really good AHL player. Never translated it to the NHL, and that happens for players. You're very fortunate enough to have the skill to play in the NHL. These guys, they're not playing in a beer league. They're getting paid to play legitimate hockey. Stay down. Don't get your character destroyed. Don't get your confidence killed. Just stay down in the AHL, win some Calder Cups, and bring some fans into, the arena in Lehigh.
So to start closing out, Josh, we agree. Line A is a defensive liability. But he just scores more, right? He's better on offense, at least as far as putting pucks in nets. But he runs into some of the same things that a lot of good goal scorers do, which is they're streaky.
Was Alexander Ovechkin when he first came up? Was he this great defensive player? No, he scored goals. Flyers fans would kill for a guy who scores goals. Like, they'll worry about the plus minus later on down in his career when he hasn't won a Stanley Cup. But they need that guy who can just put the puck in the net.
So, splitting time hurt Lyon. Look, nobody wants to be. He's been stuck in limbo most of the season. But the reality is Lyon is like a 3. He's like he's that kind of player. He's a really good AHL goalie, as Chris and Paul both said. He's not really like we he's not he's not old, but we've seen enough of him to know that he's probably not, a 20 NHL start goaltender. I think that's fair, right? That's not a knock against Alex Lyon. It's just a fair assessment.
No, there's no harm in saying it, because if he was an NHL goalie, even with splitting time, he would have proved it, and he hasn't. Because if in training camps and development camps and summer camps, if he would have proved that he could have been a NHL backup, they would have let him. They wouldn't have gone outside the organization, because why would you? You have a cheap option here. But I mean, if things went differently, but he had his time in the A.
Yeah, I mean, his goals against is 3.15, and he's got an 890 save percentage. I mean,
are you talking about this year?
No, his career. His
career.
Yeah, he's played in 16 NHL games. So he's given up 30.
He had a great game the other night, right? He had a great game the other night. Everybody enjoyed watching him play the other night.
He had a really good save, which, people are talking about save of the year. I don't,
it was very nice. It was very nice.
It was very nice.
And you enjoy those games. The Flyers have never been good at developing young goaltenders. They usually have to be exceptional. That being said, the Phantoms are, we can only judge what we can see, and I don't know that what I've seen from Lyon, I'd want to see again 20 starts in a single season. I think he's a very nice player to have in case of injury. I don't necessarily know that you would want to go into a season next year with Hart and Lyon.
If he was good enough, he would have put. He's put up good AHL numbers.
Yeah,
he would have been dominant.
Yes, especially for how long he's been there.
Yeah, he hasn't been dominant, and yes, their history shows that they have not developed young goalies. That being said, if you look at some of the work that the goaltender, both Schwab, was it Corey Schwab? No, not Corey Schwab. Who was the Flyers goalie coach before
Dillabaugh?
I can't think of his name. And my brain keeps saying Corey Schwab, but I know it's not Corey Schwab.
It's not Corey Schneider either.
He played with Corey Schwab, actually, but he was very good. I mean, look what he did with Leighton and Bush on the cup runs.
Let me be fair. Because development might not be the right word. They have not been very good at being patient with young goaltenders. You're right. Leighton and Boucher did have very good runs here. They did do a good job at developing those players. The organization wasn't very patient. I think Boucher would be one of the first people to talk about how, bringing in Czechmanic to compete for his job was not good for him.
Jeff Reese.
There you go.
Well, real quick, we'll get back. A good AHL goals against average is like 2.4.
That's a good, but usually when you
he's almost at 2.8.
But I think where Paul is coming from, and I think that I would agree, is when you're talking about someone that's ready to go to the NHL, it's going to be even better than that.
Oh, right. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, he's an average goaltender. He's a good average goaltender. It just happens that the Phantoms have been really good the last couple of years he's been on there.
So we have a couple things that I want to make sure we cross off, and we'll try to do them rapid fire. We mentioned a bunch of names, and yeah, right. And let me do it closer to the mic. We've mentioned a couple of names. There's another name that would be on the move, but it's in division. I would imagine Jack Eichel's going to be on the move. Is that a name that you think the Flyers will be tied to?
No. I mean, I think they'll make a call on it, but I also don't think he's going to get moved, because that would be devastating. I don't see how they can do that.
And what is he, a $10 million a year player right now?
Yes.
Yeah. That's not an easy contract for anybody to fit. So it's not an easy move.
Not to mention, in order to get them to part with him, you have to give up so much. You're not just talking about giving up, Hagen a third. You're talking about giving up. You're talking about giving up
too much.
So much of your young talent. You're talking about giving up Carter Hart for Jack Eichel, and you're not doing
some combination of every high, good prospect you have and picks, right? So But it's a name that's going to be out there in the offseason. So be
Yeah.
prepared for that name to be discussed in trade rumors.
But,
The next, go ahead, Chris.
And then, but I'm saying is that you're talking about the $10 million, and depending on what they do with the draft, with the expansion draft, then you're only left with a $16 million salary cap. So that's it. I don't think they'll make a move for him.
So it's going to be a name that's going to be tied to a lot of teams, I believe, because he's very unhappy. Everybody knows it, including the Sabres organization. And they're at a precipice because you want to talk about a team that's been bad. They've been bad forever. I did you guys who are listening or are still with us, I've been looking at kind of just, is it possible to go from mediocre to good without being bad? And the Sabres, they're the Jets of hockey. Like they've been bad for just about ever. And so they're at what are they going to decide to do? They haven't been in a quote unquote like rebuild because they've had quite a few top 5 picks, but they're at a place where it hasn't worked. Do they go back to the drawing board another time? So it's going to be a name that's going to be tied to a lot of teams. The Flyers also signed Elliot Denoyer to an entry-level contract today, along with there was another name that was added as an entry-level contract. Do you guys remember who that was?
I missed the name.
Okay. Denoyer is what, a former 4th-round pick?
Yes.
He's had a very good junior career. There's some things to be excited about.
He exploded last year. The first half of his season last year, he was just lighting the lamp.
And obviously, I since we've been on an hour, Cam York makes his NHL debut. I would imagine
a reason to watch.
Yeah, I would imagine I think the practice line they had him paired with Sam. And I don't know if some of that is because Ghost is out of the lineup and they just
that's what it is.
Yeah. So
AV said that Cam York's going to be the quarterback on the power play.
Why not?
Well, can't get worse.
The power play
can't
sucks,
get worse.
So
yeah. And I'm going to be honest with you. Like, as much as I like Ivan Provorov, that's not what he's good at. It's just not what
he doesn't have the release. He doesn't have the puck moving ability that a guy like Ghost and York have.
He's not quite as creative as those guys either.
Don't forget, we also have Tyson Forrester.
He's down there in Lehigh. He's having a very nice year in a year that he should have been in juniors again. When we talk about high end, Tyson Forrester's ceiling, we don't know, but his ceiling isn't Nathan McKinnon. So when I'm talking about that kind of talent, like Tyson Forrester, we'll see what he ends up being, but he's more probably like a top 6 than a top.
It's too early to tell.
Yeah, it's too early to tell. But when you start talking about prospects, sometimes what you're looking at is, what's the range of outcomes, and his range of outcomes. We'll see if he cleans up his skating. It might be really good. That's been the knock on him. Has been his edge work. Am I correct with that, Paul? It's not just the skating; it's his edges.
Yes. Yeah.
And they signed Ole Loxell.
Okay, so I think he's a former 6th-round pick.
Yes.
Well, I really know my stuff. You guys should watch. But Denoyer is a very, very exciting player because he had such a big flash. It's interesting to see if it's going to translate to AHL. And York, look, the power play can't be worse. And he's played in how many games in Lehigh? He had a goal and an assist the other night, right before he was out with his minor illness. I think he had an assist night there as well. So in a small handful of games, he's got 3 points. And
congratulations to Travis Konechny on getting engaged.
So this is usually where we call it a day. For you guys that stuck it out, TK and Rises, love the feedback. Very engaging. If you guys are still sticking around, this is our new home, Flyerz. I don't have the lineup of shows, but I know, Chris, you are on Sunday.
Sundays at 7, we're doing a Diamond Club podcast, and then very soon I'll be on at Tuesdays at 7 doing the Sixers.
And we will be on at 5:30 on Thursdays going forward.
No, 6:15. And there are some Eagles centric shows. There's a wrestling show on Fridays, I believe.
The TLC show. I know they're working on a UFC show, which you will be covering most likely.
Yeah. For you guys that don't know me, I believe actually that I'll be going back to jiu-jitsu sooner rather than later.
Still gonna talk shit.
It's been a couple years. Some injuries have forced me to give it up for a little while. But yes, a UFC show is on the horizon.
We are going to do I feel like I thought eventually I think we're doing a roundtable recap of the Eagles draft, but
and in the leading into the season, I do also believe there'll be a flyerz fantasy live fantasy draft of some kind, and so stay tuned for those things.
But Randall Cunningham.
The network covers it all, right? There's wrestling. There's going to be UFC that's coming. There's football. There's a Sixers show coming. Phillies on Sunday. Check the Facebook page if that's where you're watching. If you're watching on Twitter or Twitch, check the Facebook page for the lineup. This is our new home. We're the Tendys on Pattison every Thursday at 5:30, and 5:30 is not 6:15. We are built similarly. Right? We're all the shows are built similar.
Yes.
We're built similar. We're not different. We're similar.
Very similar.
Kind of different, a little the same, but kind of different.
Just a wee little bit.
All right, guys, it's been fun. We will catch Chris on Sunday. We'll be back next Thursday.
Phillies had a 4-game sweep today.